Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Tonight's topic is about social studies, and we're going to talk about what is social studies and what you should teach at the varying levels for your children. If at any time you have any questions, feel free to message me a question using the chat function, and I will answer your questions at the end of the webinar. So, for example, what is social studies? Social studies can be divided into 5 different categories that need to be covered at various levels throughout the school years. The very first subset of social studies that we talk about is societal structure. What I mean by societal structure is I mean you teach your children about family. You've got your parents, your siblings, your grandparents, aunts and uncles. That is their first exposure to social studies, is learning about who they are within the realm of their family. Social studies tends to refer to a person's place within the greater world around them. So, as young children, your children are learning about their role in the family and their role in the world. So you would begin by teaching them societal structure. Then, once they've got a good grasp on society, that they have families, and then families have friends, and you've got the church, you've got cities, you've got countries. That's kind of where all that comes about. Then you go into history. And again, history for your family, where you begin teaching history, may look different than another family. But history refers to the story of the world. And then the next section is geography. Geography refers to reading maps and knowing where places are in relation to other places. And then we've got economics. Economics is one of the most important aspects of social studies, as it talks about how countries work together and how the economies are interlaced between the different countries, how trade is done between the countries, things like that. And then the final section of social studies is government. Government is one that you will tend to wait till your children are a little older to teach. For example, when they are in, say, kindergarten, first, second, third grade, you might teach them about the city government and the state government, but you won't really get into what government is until much later. So the first thing we want to focus on for preschool to roughly first grade, maybe a little older depending on your child's abilities, is to focus on societal structure. And by a societal structure, again, we're talking about the family. We want our children to know, what does it mean to be a family? What does it mean to have a mom? What does it mean to have a dad? What does it mean to be a child within the structure of the family? What responsibilities do the parents have? What responsibilities do the child have? Just different things like that. And that stuff you naturally teach when a child is first learning how to talk. The next thing you would want to learn is teach your children about your family traditions and the holidays that you celebrate. But more importantly, teach them why. Many children don't know why we celebrate the holidays or why we do have the traditions we have. You want to teach them the reason behind what you celebrate. And as soon as your child is old enough to talk, it is important that they learn the following: their birthday, their address, their phone number, and their parents' names. The reason why this is important is, if, God forbid this happens, but if they get separated from you then they can communicate these things to a police officer or to a caring adult, and they can get assistance when they need assistance. Um, Once you have covered your family traditions and your holidays and things like that, you would want to focus on teaching your children the difference between a city and the country. For example, if you live on a farm, you might talk about what farm life is like and then take them to a city to show them the difference, and vice versa. If you live in the city, you would teach them what city life is like, but it is also good to expose them to a farm and what life in the country is like. And then it is important that they know what country they live in respect to the world, and that they know what city and what state they live in. So that's kind of what you would focus on through roughly first grade, maybe a little older, depending on your child's ability. Then for second through fourth grade, what you would focus on is knowing that the world is divided into countries. You would teach your child there are other countries in the world. America is not the only place in the world. Just like there are different states in America, there are different countries in the world. You would also teach them that the states are divided into different counties. Now, when you study Louisiana, you will find they do not have counties, instead they have parishes. And that is important for your children to know, that in Louisiana they have parishes instead of counties. You would also want to teach that the counties are divided into cities and townships. And I would get them involved in your local elections and local government. Teach them what the trustees do. Teach them what the mayor does. Teach them the role of the judge. Take them to the courthouse for your county. Take them to your state house. Just take your time and teach them what their world looks like. And then, of course, you would also want to teach them the names and locations of the oceans and the continents. One of the ways that I recommend learning about other countries is what we did as a family when I was growing up. We had what was called a country night. What that meant was that we got together with two other families on a monthly basis. Every person, adults and children, did a report on the aspect of one country. For example, the hosting family would fix a traditional meal from that country, and they would dress in the traditional clothing. And then somebody would do a report on the economy, somebody would do a report on the climate, or the geography, the history, the government. Just anything we could find out about that country, we would have a report on it. And that would give us exposure to other places of the world. We had a chance to eat the way they did, see how they dressed, as well as, in a fun way, learn their history and their role in the world. So that's what I would recommend you do. You don't want more than 3 families in this group, because otherwise you'll have trouble finding enough information to do reports. And then for 5th grade through 8th grade, this is where you would want to focus on your really studying the history of the world. Up to the point of 4th grade, there really is not a necessity to have social studies as its own separate class. Instead, what I would do is incorporate social studies into your language arts through reading literature that is what I call historically accurate. An excellent example is the Dear America series. That is a series of books written from the point of view of children in various historical time periods. There's roughly 25 books in that series. Another good series for girls is the American Girl historical books and the historical dolls. I highly recommend those to teach history and about America's involvement in war and just American history in general. Any other books that take place throughout the different time periods would be good as well. So when you have a child entering approximately fifth grade, what I would do is start teaching social studies as its own class. And I would start with the beginning of the world. This is based on your family's view of where history begins. Now, for the Christian families, I think it's important to note when your child is ready, they should know at least the ideas behind the theory of evolution. I recommend you teach them how you believe in regard to evolution, but they need to know what it is about. So you would start with the beginning of history, whether that's the biblical history or scientific history, it's up to you where you start. But what I would do is study history in a chronological order. Go through ancient history. Study world geography as you are studying ancient history. And on through study Egypt, Rome, Greece, Mayas, Aztecs, all these major groups should be studied. And then when you start getting a little closer to modern time era, you go through Rome, and then you go through the early ages of world history, and you go through the Middle Ages. When you get to the Exploration Age in the 1600s, you should break off and study American history. Then what I would do is study every 100 years of history in the context of what is going on in America. For example, the 1600s focuses on the exploration of Christopher Columbus and the other explorers. Teach your children how that impacted America, how that is our beginnings of our history. And then when you reach the 1700s, what I would do is first study what happens from 1700 to 1800 in the context of America, and then go back and say, okay, while America was fighting the Revolutionary War, this is what was going on in England, England, Asia, Russia, and teach what is going on in those countries during that time of American history. And again, follow the presidency, teach George Washington's presidency, and teach what was going on in the world during the era of his presidency, and teach world history within the context of American history. You will find that if you approach history in this way, your children will have a better understanding of the development of the world and will be able to relate world history to American history better than if you taught American history separately from world history. I highly recommend teaching those at the same time and looking at the context of the world. Then we get to government. This is a very important aspect of social studies. From preschool to approximately second grade, you should know the president, you should know who Congress is and the Supreme Court, and how they all relate to each other, as well as start to be thinking and teaching what it means to be an American. Then when you get to third and fourth grade, that's where you study your city government and your state government. Again, visit the county courthouse, visit the state house, go to what I recommend taking them to both the Democratic organization and their Democratic Party headquarters and the Republican headquarters. You want them to be well-rounded. You want them to know what the differences in the two groups are. So let them hear both sides. And then in 5th to 8th grade, this is where you'll study the different types of government. You've got your republic, you've got your democracy, you've got your socialism, your oligarchy, your theocracy. Study what those mean and how they differ from America. And you want to study that America is a democracy. You should also know the different levels of government in America. There again, you've got your county government, your city government, your state government, and ultimately the federal government. And again, know what it means to be a good citizen. Know the importance of voting, the importance of knowing what the issues are and what's on the ballot. Know how decisions are made and the checks and balances that are within our country that keep one group from becoming too powerful. And then in high school, this is where you really start to see government being studied in depth. Go into the Constitution, study the major cases that are before the Supreme Court. They should be highly involved in the elections process. Again, if you teach government within the context of the elections, you will find your children have a much greater understanding and respect for our government than if it was just some arbitrary thing that they knew was there but didn't really understand. And then the last section is economics. Again, in preschool to 2nd grade, you really should be teaching them about coins and the bills. They should know that money is earned and is used to buy products and services. By 2nd grade, they should know how to count money to make purchases, and they should know how to make change with bills and cents. And then from 3rd to 8th grade, you really want to learn about how the economy relies on trade to be successful and what is meant by the phrase goods and services. I suggest you begin studying the stock market and the effect of each country's economy on the world economy by about 6th or 7th grade when you start getting into some of the more of the world history. And then, of course, it's never too early to start teaching about budgeting and cost analysis for families. You could start as young as preschool teaching if you want this toy, you have to save for it. Obviously, you're not going to use the word budget for a preschooler. But it is never too early to learn the basics of budgeting. I think by the time a child hits about 7 years old, they should be involved in the grocery bill, the grocery shopping, and the menu planning. I firmly believe that by the time a child is 7 or 8 years old, they should have 1 or 2 nights a month that they are responsible for planning the menu and then going in and learning how to use a phone and calculate how much money they're spending on groceries to prepare that meal. That is the most real life lesson that you could teach them about the economy and how money works. And then in high school, you want to learn how the economy affects government and how the government affects the economy. And then you want to look at how society works within the different types of economies in the world and how each country's economy is impacted by the economy in other countries. Also, by the time a child reaches high school, they should learn how to figure taxes for individuals and families. You should be having discussions about how to determine what amount is a good withholding on their paycheck for taxes. Once they hit high school, they should be having jobs of their own, whether it's through the family or friends or through the community, but they need to be working and getting experience in the work world. Again, they can also begin studying college by the time at the age of 14. So just by having these open conversations about student loans, about how much college is, and things like that, that will play into their education and give them a greater sense of what the role of money in the world. So at this time, if you have any questions, I'll go ahead and send them to me. Okay, one of the questions that we have is how to approach money for children. One of the things I recommend is that you um, either give children an allowance with real money that they can use to go to the store and spend, or even come up with your own currency for your family, that you have a chore chart. There are certain chores that they should do just because they're a part of the family. And then you should have a list of chores that they can do to earn extra money. These may be things like scrubbing the toilet, or or even they could be volunteering to go to a nursing home to interact with the residents of a nursing home. They can be whatever you want, as serious or as silly as you want. But the goal of that is to give them the opportunity to earn money. And then you want them to get into the practice of putting money back for savings and deciding how much they're going to spend and how much they're going to save. If you can impact on them the importance of saving money, the earlier the better. They would be much better off financially later in life if they learn early how to save money. Okay, another question is about how to incorporate social studies and language arts, like I mentioned earlier. What I would recommend is that you use a wide variety of books in your language arts. When you are teaching language arts, I highly recommend going to the library and using the library to check out books to read. Your children should be reading books on their own when they're able, and you should also be reading to them, even clear up through high school. Children may not say this, but high schoolers enjoy having books read aloud to them, even though they won't admit it. So what I would do is find books that focus on different time periods and different countries, and even different aspects of history, whether it's a war or, like in our own history, the prairie, the Indians, any people group. I would incorporate those into your language arts and use language arts to teach about different people groups and their impact in the world. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, we'll go ahead and end for tonight. Thank you so much for attending, and I would appreciate it if you would give me some feedback on what you thought about the webinar. Thank you and have a good evening.